I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, July 2nd, 2024 Watertown Plan Commission meeting. Brandy, can we get a roll call?
Yes, Dargis Johnson.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Dolly.
Here.
Spire.
Here.
Aletsky.
Present.
Brink.
Here.
Kays.
Yep.
And Colhane and Ford are absent. We have a quorum, and this would be the majority of the members, which would be 5 for an affirmative recommendation.
4. 5 would be 2/3.
Go.
You know,
Good
I don't
thing.
know if we really have to have all these differences there, but it makes it really confusing.
We don't. We don't.
Yeah.
We'll fix that too.
Yeah.
Moving on, we'll say number 3 on the agenda, invitation for public comment, participant submittal. If anybody's here to speak, it doesn't look like we have anybody in the room other than what's on the agenda, so we'll move on to item 4, approval of the agenda. Need a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on the agenda before we vote? All in favor of the agenda? Any opposed? Agenda's approved. Moving on to 5A on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the June 6th, 2024 meeting. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a motion? Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion on those meeting minutes? All good? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll abstain.
Noted Kays has abstained. That carries. Moving on to 6A is the regular agenda item for ordinance change number 24-08 and 24-10. Brandy, I'll pass it over to you.
All right, thank you, Blake. So if you recall from the June 6th Plan Commission meeting, we had discussed an ordinance amendment that is here before you again today for the BP Business Park District to allow for, and at that time, we were looking at a variety of storage options to allow for the storage use, either storage shop, shipping containers, and then the indoor climate control type of use, which we do not have an ordinance specified anywhere currently. And, you know, if the board is receptive to what is proposed, then we could look at incorporating it into other districts. As you recall, we had the application made for a property adjacent to the Casey's on 19th previously. So, but the reason why we've backpedaled on or tightened this language up is, and the reason why it was tabled at the June 6th meeting was so that staff was able to reach out to property owners within the BP district. Now, again, that's not typical for a zoning text amendment. However, the BP district is very small, and there's not a whole lot of, there's only 2 landowners that own undeveloped property out there, and that is the Redland Arts Center and then the Watertown Development Company. And so I was able to reach out to Julie as a representative for, and Julie Rainham, as the representative for the Redland Arts Center, and then Chris Clifton for the Watertown Development Company, and had great conversations with them, heard concerns that they had, and which they'll most likely express with you today and when we open the public hearing. As far as, you know, from the district standpoint, I did in the agenda itself, in the background for this item, I did list or include the purpose for the district, and obviously then just summarized in the fact that this is a sensitive area. It's within our, it's kind of the gateway to our community. It is the backdrop to the beautiful Redland Arts Center that was strategically placed, and then on top of it, there are covenants for this entire district. So the idea, the thought behind, I guess, tightening up this potential use would be that if somebody came forward and it would only be allowed as a conditional use in the BP district, and the definition would be storage facility indoor, and that is a building for the storage of non-hazardous commercial or private goods and materials in a climate-controlled structure with individual units within a common structure with access to units available from the interior only, without water or sewer utilities for individual units. So that was that you wouldn't end up with people living in indoor climate-controlled storage units. And so the idea with this proposal is that Jim Owen is the applicant and agent for Kurmar LLC, who currently own the property. And currently Worth Electronics resides in this building, but then it is for sale with, I think, the hope that the use of this indoor climate control storage could be incorporated. But what to keep in mind is that we don't create ordinance based on one-off, because this building is aesthetically pleasing and it fits within the district, but we don't want to open the door to having uses that might ruin the integrity of the district. So, but one thing to keep in mind with that is there are still the covenants for this Mallard Point area that would, on top of conditions that would be placed if they came forward with a request, let's say for new construction for a storage facility indoor, the board could put conditions on that, but then also they would still have to follow the design characteristics and use restrictions and whatnot, open space for parking and landscaping. And I have included those covenants within the agenda packet as well, that hopefully you had the opportunity to review. But just all things to keep in mind. One other thing, is I was doing some research on this type of use on the American Planning Association website in the Knowledge Center there. And a lot of communities have seen this push for this type of use as the office, the trends of large office buildings have changed after COVID, where people are allowed to do remote working. So they've actually seen that this type of use incorporated into large office buildings, which is what this existing building in particular does or was at one point. But it also, we want to make sure that we're still, for any new application, or just that it's the highest and best use for what we foresee this district. So with all of that, I was going to try to keep it more brief. I'll stand by for questions.
Mr. Chair?
One second, Mr. Case. So Brandy, in relation to the definition that you've put up there, you've left any of those kind of design criteria, what it's constructed of, what it looks like on the outside, out of the definition, because it would either be covered by the district itself or the overlay district, or in this case, a combination of those and some additional covenants.
Yeah. So there's no overlay district at the BP, but there are, they would have to come for the conditional. There are a few design standards within the BP district, but it doesn't, but you could still, the board could do additional conditions as requested.
But this is a definition that could appear in other districts as well, right? So if we're talking a little bit into the future here, we've got the Gateway Overlay District,
yeah.
which is one of the other locations we've looked at a concept like this, right by
Yes.
Casey's there.
Yep.
So each of those kind of has their own theme and their own aesthetic requirements. This use could fit in multiple districts eventually.
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I apologize, I wasn't here on the 6th of June when you had the previous conversation, and I have not had the opportunity to review the meeting that night. So I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that previously they were talking about adding the use of storage units, and that's been removed from the discussion, outdoor storage units.
Yep.
And I do know that, dating myself, that I assisted in the development of the BP district and the covenants back in 97, 98, and 2000 when all that work was going on. And so I do remember when Julie was around there too, we were putting those things together about making the business park the gateway, the entry into the city, and not making it look like an industrial park or some of those looking, some of those reasons for it. But I do agree with Brandy that there has been a change in repurposing office buildings. And if you drove by the building and it looked like an office building other than the incidental people walking in and out with storage stuff, you might not know the difference. So I do agree with Brandy that we have been seeing this, maybe not so much in South Dakota, but in more larger metro areas, the repurposing of commercial office space. Those are my only comments. Thank you.
Yes.
Just glad that they don't want to change it into apartments. That would be tough, because I've heard of that happening too. Some of these office buildings are going into apartments.
Yep.
All right, I will go ahead and open the public hearing on this.
And there are also people on the line, so if, do we want to do, in the physical, okay, sounds good. Let me find them here. Anybody online, would you like to, sorry, Blake, this is kind of your role.
No, that's fine. I don't know if there's a easy way to pick somebody there, but if somebody wants to speak up online,
Hi, Chris Thornton from Premier Bank Card. Can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you, Chris.
Perfect. Thank you so much for taking the time and for the diligence that you're putting into reviewing this project. As you know, that Premier Bank Card has been a long-time tenant there in the business park, and we very much appreciate the aesthetics provided by the Redland Arts Center, by the entrance from Highway 212, and appreciate all of the work that's gone into making that what it is. I think in general, we do not oppose indoor storage facilities. Obviously, you know, the commission discussed on the June 6th meeting the desire to avoid outdoor storage. We would echo that sentiment. And certainly anything related to outdoor storage, I think, would destroy that aesthetic that I referenced earlier. You know, that being said, you know, recommissioning the building for what it is and turning that into indoor storage may make sense for preservation of tenancy in the district and making sure that that building continues to be used in an appropriate manner. I would caution the commission. I mean, I'm calling in from Sioux Falls. There are a number of indoor storage facilities in Sioux Falls that might likely, you know, not comply with those standards. And I recognize the business district has its own standards for what a building can look like. But the business park being a gateway into Watertown, I would want to make sure that, you know, those sight lines are preserved, that you don't end up with a 3 or 4 story building like we have down here in places where, you know, they're glass front and you very clearly see that it's a storage facility. So I think just, you know, I would echo support for turning the building into indoor storage, but would just caution the commission to make sure that you don't end up with something that becomes an eyesore down the road because you've allowed indoor storage for use in this very, you know, very important area and sightline into this town of Watertown.
Thank you, Chris. Is there any comments for Chris from the board? Okay, well, we'll take the next one online there. We do show another number online.
Just for the record, I'm the 605-333-6170 number.
We've also got a 3974 online, if you could unmute your mic.
Hi, this is Jennifer Olson from Bank Park, just listening in as well.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
No additional comments to add? It doesn't look like we have anybody else online there either, so we'll go to the room here.
Hi, my name is Julie Random. I'm here representing the Redland Arts Center, and we are opposed to this application. I want to just share a little bit of background with you. The Redland Arts Center opened in 1997 as Terry Redland's gift to his hometown. In addition to the 30 acres that the Arts Center sits on, Terry Redland purchased 5 lots in the business park and purchased 25% of the remaining lots in the entire business park. He did that to protect the neighborhood. And we, just in the last 10 days at the Redland Arts Center, is our 27th year of operation. We have, in the last 10 days, welcomed a bus from Canada, from Minnesota, from Iowa, and over in Huron, South Dakota. We average about 200 people a day at this time of the year coming through the Redland Arts Center, and the Mallard Point Business Park is the first thing they see. It's the first impression of our city. We spend, as a nonprofit foundation, $1 million a year maintaining our 30 acres and our 52,000 square foot building. We are completely self-funded. We take no taxpayer dollars. We, in fact, remit sales tax on the sale of merchandise in the gift shop. This applicant, as you all saw, I watched the video from the June 6th meeting, and Mr. Owen, clearly spelled out that this applicant desires to use the building and the parking lot. I realize that he has revised the application after the June 6th meeting, hearing that there is opposition to using the exterior storage in the parking lot, but I don't believe that his will to use that parking lot has changed. The parking lot is too large and the property too expensive for him to just simply abandon that as a potential revenue stream. My concern is that we amend this ordinance and we allow this applicant to use the building as indoor climate controlled storage, which I will go on the record as saying, if that were the only intention, we would not have an opposition to this. But we just don't believe that this applicant is intending for that to be his sole purpose. The Redland Arts Center is, we've had great neighbors. They all maintain their property. We, yes, are governed by covenants that overlay, but we believe this needs to be controlled at the city level and with all of you. I would just ask you to really consider what the intentions are of this specific application based on Mr. Owen's testimony at the first meeting. And as the gentleman from Premier Bank Card said, I think we have to be very cautious going forward into this arena, because if we're not careful, by granting this this ordinance amendment, we open the door to additional storage facilities in the business park, and we potentially risk turning the business park, which was intended to be a higher level area in our community, and turning it into a storage park. Thank you.
Julie, just a couple questions here. So in relation to the actual usage itself for indoor storage, if we were maintaining the aesthetics of the exterior buildings so that they looked like office buildings, and it was truly a usage specifically for indoor storage, you said you're not opposed to that usage, just this particular application?
I am, yes, correct, this application. I'm concerned that if the storage pods don't get approved, how can we guarantee that the parking lot doesn't become storage for boats, campers, trailers, everything else that people don't have space for on their own residence, and they turn that into storage unit or storage space there, even if it's not a storage pod. And I would just add one other thing too, and I apologize. People said to me, keep the emotion out of it, but I've been working for Terry Redland and representing him for 28 years. This is a big deal to us. Somebody on the council said last time that Terex was granted concessions, and true, Terex plants or has many trucks sitting on the property over there. Terex also employs hundreds of people in our community and has a tremendous economic impact on our city. This applicant will employ nobody and will have no economic impact on our community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to point out too, as far as the BP district, the ordinance, let alone the covenants, but the city never administers or enforces covenants. But in the BP district, like those design standards that I had, that Blake and I had referenced. So with the storage, that there cannot be outside storage, and there are various other requirements they would have to meet. The other thing to keep in mind is how we're setting this use up. They would have to come back for a conditional use where you could prohibit any of those concerns. And I think to Julie's points, a lot of that say that this application came forward and those things are all like, it's just explicitly prohibited. So the applicant and the potential next owner are aware that they can't do that. And if it's not going to cash flow, then, that's something for them to decide.
Right.
But they couldn't do it anyway, and you can see here that a conditional use may be granted if storage is appropriate and located behind visual barrier screening. But again, that would have to come back to the Board of Adjustment for a conditional use if they wanted to do any outdoor storage.
But it gets back to my point on conditional uses. If there is no basis for denial of the conditional use other than adjoining neighborhood, I think it's still generally compatible if it's a listed conditional use. And so I will tell you, a conditional use that meets all tenets of the regulations, 100 times out of 100, I will vote for it, even if the neighbors don't like it.
Unless some of those things that are spelled out in the covenants are
Exactly.
moved into the ordinance.
Right, but by reading the covenants right here, it even allows for outdoor storage with barriers shall be permitted on the site only with, if the declarant will approve it. Our conditional use permit says that it can be allowed outdoor storage if it's screened, and that's what our ordinance says it can do. But if it comes and we issue the conditional use permit because we're not enforcing the covenants, unless you adopt those covenants as part of the BP zone.
Yeah.
And
Because then you can enforce it through code enforcement, right? Once it's an ordinance.
Correct. But that's the question is, we have to be careful at the same time, because as Brandy said, the city doesn't get into the point of enforcing covenants.
Right.
Right. But I'm going to disagree, and I know that's been your stance with conditional uses, but that is why we have A through H, because all of those things do apply, and general compatibility, and we invite the neighbors in because their opinions do matter. Yes, it's ultimately somebody's private property, but it is impacting, that's why we send them to people within 250 feet, because it is impacting their vested interests too. And you always have the right to make conditions, and it applies, it'll always fall under general compatibility.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I got a question for Brandy. Let's say that, the worst case scenario happens and someone starts parking their boats and campers and stuff in the wintertime. So then the neighbors are the ones that have to call and report it, that this isn't supposed to be there, then what would happen?
So one thing to point out though, and this actually shows up on GIS, that so it would be, we never disclose who is calling in or complaining. We don't want to create neighborhood disputes. But obviously it's on record here of the concern where somebody would call in anonymously and let us know. Our code enforcement officer would go out there and say, hey, these have to be removed because you don't have a conditional use, and you actually, the covenants don't even allow you to do this. So, but what's kind of interesting is that Terex does use the street today for storage of their equipment. It is at the end there. Terex is a great economic business and whatnot for our community, but that's, that's an issue today. That's not following.
But that's on the street, not on the personal property in the parking lot, correct?
Yeah, which almost makes it worse.
I just want to, I really understand what Julie is saying, and what the man from Premier Bankcard was saying too, is that we got to be careful, because once something gets established and set, well, okay, move it in the spring, and then there's weeds growing up around it. You just don't want that.
And that's where explicitly it could be added as a condition to the conditional use for those types of things. And this is just something in this research that was noticed. It has not been a complaint basis for this parking with the right-of-way. So that's where we're complaint basis of how we enforce things. And unfortunately, it would take a call for it being a disturbance for somebody.
We incorporated a lot more design aesthetics requirements into the Gateway Overlay District that we did on north of here, right, on the access road by Casey's out to Walmart.
Yep.
that covers, green space, covers the design aesthetics and construction of the building materials, height and placement, goes into much more level of detail than our other zoning districts. So these are all enforceable from a city standard, but anything like this that is existing in the covenants out here at the BP, the city can't enforce or doesn't enforce.
And we do have a few requirements here for setbacks, site coverage. So it is higher standard than most districts. So we're saying not more than 50% of the surface area of any site shall be devoted to, and or placement, to be devoted to the erection and or placement of a building. Parking needs to be paved, which that's a city ordinance anyway. But the gateway overlay is more intricate. I'm actually, as far as enforcing that district, I wish it was written differently and a little more clear. And so those are things when it comes forward for recodification, staff has went through that because it's quite just hard to follow. It's hard to interpret and it's hard for people to even understand that we get when people are trying to develop out there. So we're breaking that down to still meet the same intent, but to make it clearer to understand because we want people to be able to read it.
Mr. Chair, quick question. So as written with the definition, just playing out here, if it gets approved, there would be no restrictions for modifications of the structure to, say, put bay doors, 10 by 20, 10 by 30 on either side, any side, replace solid walls with glass, or any of those things. There would be nothing that would create a limitation or any constraints of that nature if approved, correct?
Correct. Well, and as far as like the garage door, like what you're talking for the bay doors, they could not have like a whole row where it's storage units because it has to be accessed interior.
Got to be interior, but you could put one, say the north, giant bay door, drive-through, center access, stalls on the side, exit out the other side, just for ease of operation and use. And, it'd be conducive with the intent and purpose of the structure. But those bay doors could also be facing the Redland Center, their neighbor, to the east. So it's just, there's no prohibition or restrictions. If approved as written right now, there would be nothing that would prohibit them from modifying that existing structure to meet their business needs.
They could also do that today though,
Right.
as long as it met, but it'd fall under the covenants more so.
Mr. Chair.
And that's where it's important. The definition's not going to have those requirements, right? The zone that it's in or the overlay is what's going to control that.
But as requested, as we're going forward, there is nothing being proposed to any conditions.
To add anything to the BP zoning district, yeah.
Mr. Chair, I think the definition of storage facility indoor is necessary.
Yep.
I mean, carte blanche across the city and, depending on the districts that we want to put it in. But I think it's important that we have a definition because we kind of have that already in the city. We've been doing it ad hoc. So I think that's important. I'm still not convinced that this particular type of use as proposed as just a listed use without further nuances is appropriate in the business park district at this point.
Right.
I don't think it provides enough protections to those businesses. I don't think it's an intent of what was going on 25 years ago when things were being put together, even though I know things change over time and we all get older and we have to be more accommodating to change. I think that before I would support adding number 5 to the BP zone, I would like to have some more design standards in place specific to the business park. We can leave the other things together for the commercial, highway, commercial, industrial, if that's where we're going to plant that use.
Yeah.
But I think maybe, yes, approve the definition, no, not approve number 5 without a little bit more work on what we would like to see in the business park. And maybe that's working with Ms. Ranum and those other tenants out there to what would make them comfortable to allow the repurposing of buildings, because it can happen. And I think we need to be cognizant of that.
And I'd really like to look at the Willow Creek overlay district at the same time, because we have some crossover in terms of aesthetics and the way that we've looked at these as gateways to Watertown with higher aesthetics. I think the requirements of what we would like to see as, design criteria for this use would be very similar in both of those locations. So if we're going to consider adding it to one, let's look at the whole region and how we would like to treat it.
Well, and that's a good point, Blake, because then, as we've been talking about recodification, I need to get with our city attorney Carrico, because it has just it's not as priority because we've had so many other more hot ticket items. So that might even be a good opportunity that we can get some of these reworkings brought back as an ordinance amendment, and then also incorporate it for consistency of administering these. Do make that consistent with the BP, because they are both gateways.
Yep.
And obviously, it's a highly visible area where this BP district is. And I also think about incorporating the covenants into the BP district, and we can go on top of that, but at least because then it's enforceable, so we're consistent with what
Yeah.
the wishes of the district are and why it was created.
Yeah, we may not put the entire covenant list into the ordinance, but there's certainly crossover stuff there that I feel should exist in ordinance that does exist in other areas of ordinance.
Which may be specific to BP, but it could also be bleeding over to certain highway commercial uses as well.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So taking action on the definition itself today really does nothing in terms of the application. It puts the use in the book. We've
Yep.
still not authorized it anywhere.
Mr. Chair?
The public hearing's still open.
The public hearing is still open, yeah.
So if you have anything that you, or you follow.
Well, I think I am. It's a little convoluted for me, but I think I have a grasp.
As we're waiting, Mr. Chair, I mean, if we get down to that point where I think I would encourage bringing the language of, suggested language in the change, combining it with what we're talking about here, adding anything else, having a meeting with Ms. Ranum and the other tenants
Yep.
to come up with, and that could come back to us as early as next month, since a lot of it's already been written. It just hasn't been sent out to anybody. 2 months at the tops. And we could keep things moving forward.
At least to look at this portion of it, right?
Yeah.
I think, for even in perpetuity, just so we have the BP district secured. I think that that's a good thing, even if this, and depending on how the use itself, and I appreciate that at least, the definition, if that moves forward, that we can have that in ordinance. We just don't have it in any districts yet, but we can get there. But, that's where these ordinance amendments that are proposed by applicants make it difficult.
We're reacting.
Yeah, because it's also not high priority for staff necessarily to spend the time on, creating this use for the definition, but because that's how it is written in ordinance of how it can be applied for, and by no means is the BP, but it just would never have come up. And it would, as far as when we get an application. So we have to, it might not be able to be turned around very super quick, because we would want to make sure to work with the right parties, with the Redland Arts Center and the Watertown Development Company, to make sure that we were getting it right before it came back. So that's where, it just makes it really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, you got it on the agenda and you got it in front of us. We're doing our due diligence right now, and that's what we all need to do.
Right. I mean, if this was a planning commission, city council, or staff-driven agenda item, we would have a little bit more front-end work done into it before we would even
Yeah.
get to public hearing.
Right.
And because we would have addressed these questions in a study groups or what have you before it came to us. And so when we're coming here now, I mean, we're reacting to it, and, we're punching holes that we would normally be punching holes in on sidebar meetings.
Yep, and in our goals, like, we have our goals and priorities as far as the plan commission and city as in general, so that's just where, we might want to look at that altogether, of how we take these types of applications forward because the property itself still has marketability for selling it with the existing uses. You know, so it might be maybe starting out with just very informal new business and to say, and that's kind of where we started, you know? So,
No, I think we have to have a process for bringing these things forward, but we also can't act hastily, right? So we're
Yeah.
kind of reacting as we get the information, but we certainly don't want to act hasty on this district or any district in town. So we need to answer some of these questions, and we need to talk through this a little bit more.
yeah, totally agree.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just a couple of points I would like to make. There is,
I think there's.
I wasn't in favor of the storage units back when we were talking about it on 19th and 1st. There's a place for storage, not in our gateway, not even close out to the Redland Center. I can't even believe we're having the discussion, to be quite honest with you. I get that there's an empty building out there. I get that, you know, people after COVID, we don't have to work in those buildings anymore. But I have been in a Chicago indoor storage building, massive, and it's a mess. I don't care how clean you think you're going to keep that. I have renters too. I have rental units. It's not the same. It's not the same. I had a couch sitting on my front yard the other day at a rental unit. And I get it. I think people set it out there to see if somebody can use it, and I greatly appreciate that. But when you have an indoor storage, indoor, outdoor, I don't care. People are going to, I don't want the couch anymore. I'm going to leave it here. And pretty soon we got 5 couches sitting there. Pretty soon we've got boxes that are, you know, I don't need the box anymore. Pretty soon it's blowing around. You do not control garbage. You do not control that the way you think you do. When it's an unmanned building, when you have millions of dollar property that was developed for this city, and then we're just going to muck it up, I absolutely, outdoor storage, indoor storage should not be in our business gateway. That's my opinion.
And it might not make it in the Gateway District at all, and that's why we need to have further discussion on that item. I think the desire to have indoor storage somewhere in town is there. The question is then, you know, where and like what are the restrictions on it? Did you have anything to add in the public hearing while we have it open?
Yes, I do, thank you. I'm Jim Owen, and I'm the agent for the owner of the building. You know, I respect and appreciate the concerns that have been voiced, but I think some of them are reaching a little bit for problems that aren't there. If someone's speeding on a highway, you don't ban cars, the police give them a speeding ticket. If people are trashing the outside of this building, which would certainly run counterintuitive to anyone that wants to run a successful climate-controlled storage business, then the appropriate city department would enforce the ordinances and rules that exist. Objecting to a building like this because it may not have a certain number of employees seems to be, first of all, I don't have any idea how many employees are going to be there. They have to have people that clean. They have to have people, janitorial services. They have a cafeteria and 2 coffee bars. There'll certainly be probably some limited food service available, beverages and so forth. So with all respect, I think that there's a little bit of hysteria about comparing this building to a huge storage building in Chicago. I wouldn't compare anything in Watertown to anything in Chicago. We're not from Chicago. We don't live like people that are, and our city certainly isn't run like Chicago. I think that the individual that wants to buy this building and convert it to climate-controlled storage is responding to a demand that he's found in the market for that purpose. There's a climate-controlled storage across the alley from this building. How many objections that have been voiced today have been realized from that facility. You don't have people throwing garbage out in the alley or the street. You don't have problems with the tenants. It's a business purpose. And anymore, with the way businesses are operating, people working from their homes, a lot of people have file boxes full of documents that have to be preserved that they don't have room for in their homes. They used to keep them at the office, but the office is no longer there. So, nobody's going to deny that it'd be a travesty if somebody dug a tunnel through this building for drive-through, but just the sheer economic probability of something like that, when you've already got such a beautiful facility to house your business in, just seems to me, to be an unrealistic objection. If this is approved for interior only, climate-controlled storage, interior access, there aren't going to be doors all around the building. There's going to be a front and a back entrance like there is now. And if it's approved as applied for, there isn't going to be any outside storage. The owner of this building is going to have a huge parking lot left over that he doesn't need, and he intends to build other buildings on it. Those buildings will have to be approved by the appropriate city processes. So I'm anxious to dispel any fears or concerns of a realistic nature that I can from my experience working with the sellers and the buyers. But some of these things seem to me to be, I can't defend against them because they're so unrealistic. I don't know what else to say. They're applying for interior climate-controlled storage. I live in Sarasota 6 months of the year, and these facilities are all over that town. They complement businesses that are no longer using office buildings. They're clean, they're attractive, they're aesthetically compliant with existing neighboring uses. They don't cause traffic problems. They do employ some people, maybe not a lot, but some people. And it's a need that the buyer's research has indicated exists in Watertown. The 9 storage units across the alley from you are full and have been since it opened as a storage unit. They used to be an auto supply store. Well, times have changed. That demand isn't there anymore, but interior climate-controlled storage seems to be. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions you have, but I hope that a realistic objective review is applied to this. I want it to work too. I live here. I wouldn't want a junk-filled yard in the gateway of my city. But if somebody starts storing things outside Redland Arts Center, I believe you could count on that being objected to the appropriate city authorities and the city authorities taking care of it. That's why they're there. So I thank you for your critical analysis. That's important. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. But I think that there are some things that have been expressed that might not really be very realistic in this case.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. Did anybody have any questions for Mr. Owen? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Apologize, the process is not as quick and forthright as you'd like it to be, but when we do look at planning and zoning here, we have to start with the basis of planning and zoning, and we have to look at the entire nature of the code in all the districts that it would apply to. So while you might be concerned with the one individual property, we have to be concerned with the whole and how it's going to play out over the long term with the city. So we're just trying to do our due diligence.
I support your responsibilities. I was in commercial real estate in Sioux Falls for 45 years. I attended a lot of city council meetings. What you're doing needs to be applauded. It's great that you're here and take the time to do a good job.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
I will go ahead and close the public hearing at this time.
For the purposes of getting this off for discussion, I will make a motion to recommend approval to the city council, the definition contained in chapter 21.90, storage facility indoor, as presented by staff, while at the same time, at this time, omitting number 5, proposed storage facility indoor from the conditional use.
Should we take this as
They're listed as two
definitions?
separate actions anyway, so
I'm sorry, okay, I'm sorry.
I'll let you start over.
I'll take the action on including the definition of indoor storage facility as presented by the staff.
I'll second that. I think the definition looks really good. I think you did a good job, Brandy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah, so that would go into Title 21 in the definitions, but it would not be called out in any districts yet.
Right.
if
With that
approved.
motion, yes.
Yep, with that motion.
Well, and so my intention was that you guys would act on how I have them listed for the definitions, and then if you wanted to table the ordinance number 2408 for the BP district.
Yeah, we'll act on the definition.
We'll
one
act
for-
on-
So
yeah.
that's the motion on the table.
Motion on
Get
the
a
table
second.
would be to approve ordinance number 2410, recommend approval to the city council, ordinance 2410, definition as prescribed.
Yep, so definition only on the table. So we'll take a roll call vote on that.
Okay. Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Hanson, Dolly,
Yes?
Spire,
Yes.
Aletsky,
Yes.
Brink,
Yes.
Kays.
Yeah, yes.
So that motion will carry, and that ordinance number 24-10 for the definition only will move forward with recommendation.
Tabling is not the right motion.
I was just going to chime in too, if you don't mind me. I do think at this time, I think, since this is a conditional use in a zone that already has 7 additional requirements that most zones don't have, if this were to be approved as a conditional use and this property came forward to want to use this, they would have to follow those 7 plus any additional conditions that we put on there, which could be no loading docks, certain sidings. I mean, I think if we want to try to control how these look and how they function, I think this zone might personally be the best to try to control it because of the additional requirements. Whereas if we put it in, the C1 zone, we still would have the conditional use option, but we wouldn't have all of the in-ordinance requirements, and I don't think trying to table it to write specific more requirements for that is the right option either. I think, personally, I feel like we should vote it up or down. And I'm a little bit more inclined to vote for it, just because I think we have the ability as a conditional use to put conditions on there that could keep the integrity of the district.
Mr. Chair, I'm somewhat in agreement with my esteemed colleague on the right. I believe this should be a up or down. The motion to table is an improper motion. It would be a motion to postpone would be the way if we were to move forward with that. And I think postponing the inevitable at this time without having all the information just keeps kicking the can down the road. I, on the other hand, don't think that including it as a conditional use at this time, I think that's premature. I think having some general guidance on what your design standards should be when you're doing something as opposed to ad hoc, every decision coming before us. Each board becomes different moving forward. On something as important as this specific district, I think it's probably more important to take 4 to 6 weeks. And if we put ourselves under the gun to say we want to have something to come back to us, to react to. That way, you know, we're not delaying, you know, something that could be coming before us forever. I think that we would, if I have my druthers, we deny it, but we say we're going to come back and deal with this expeditiously.
Yeah, and I think where I'm at too, my principal concern is because we've got the covenants also governing this area, and so half of the things that we've been talking about, like the loading and the signage and stuff that we typically would call out in ordinance, are called out potentially differently or more explicitly in the covenants. And if that's really the way that we want to police that district and approach that district, it should be an ordinance, plain and simple.
My only objection to that is if someone came with an office, we wouldn't, you know, that's a permitted use, it's number one in the permitted uses. We wouldn't say it has to look a certain way, it has to do this, that, or the other thing, other than what's already in ordinance. So to say that this conditional use is different, to me, doesn't fully make sense.
No, I think the concern here, Mr. Brink, is that there are areas within the covenants that do police all buildings within those covenants, so if it was an office building as well, that go above and beyond what's in ordinance. And I don't think we should be in a situation where we've got a district, especially a special district like the BP district, where half of it is in ordinance and half of it is not, because half of it is then hidden from public view.
So to chime in too, just for consistency, now, the Gateway Overlay District, when that was created, there wasn't one person in control of it. So there weren't covenants. There were two owners. So like Redland Arts Center, so I feel like that's why the BP district was left lighter and more high level, because we knew covenants were in place. And if they want, and that is in perpetuity, that those have to be followed. The city really doesn't want to get in the weeds on regulations and enforcing. And that's why I honestly, with the Gateway Overlay District, it's not ideal to administer. If that can be handled by covenants, the city stays out of it, and then all the design components that are the wishes and the integrity of the district are controlled by a group outside of the city, but we already have the standards that we feel are protecting the integrity of the district, so it's the high level things, but then the design committee with the covenants, they can get into the weeds.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got to be doing this a consistent way, and it feels like we're half in, half out.
Just with covenants, how do we normally, do we even know if places have covenants? I mean, we know of this one, obviously, it's here, but do we know of all other covenants?
No.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So we are aware of the areas that have covenants. We just don't enforce them. The city of Watertown, I'm not sure with Todd's regulations, but the city of Watertown is aware. If somebody comes and they put covenants on two properties that they own, we might not know about that. But developments, we do know.
When a new development comes into town and they have covenants, the city should know if they're there or not.
And if someone violates those covenants, that's a civil suit between those two parties.
Yes.
So if someone were to violate these covenants, it would be a civil suit between those two parties, not the city, not
Yep.
us.
The city would get drug into the lawsuit if we're culpable in any of the decision-making that got to the point of doing that, though. If we issue a CUP and we address something that's also consistent with the covenants and it's not being done and we're not enforcing it, then yes, we would get drug into that as well.
No, if we're following our ordinance, that would be a civil suit between the covenants and so anything that we're permitting, we're not looking at the covenants. We're looking at our ordinance. And then if they didn't go to the design committee as spelled out in the covenants, that would be between civilly.
If we as a condition said that we want to enforce the covenants as prescribed, which was under our ability as the Board of Adjustment in doing so, and they did not follow the covenants and we did not enforce our CUP condition, we would be culpable.
Okay, I would just advise not doing that.
Yeah, we haven't said that we're going to follow.
I'm not saying we're going to, but I'm saying the Board of Adjustment has the flexibility to go out and establish whatever condition that has germane nexus to the permit. And if that meant to make the neighbors happy that we are going to enforce their covenants, we have the ability to attach that as a condition to the CUP. And then it becomes, the onus is on the city to do that. So the question is, do you want to prescribe some general standards, design standards that are set up within the zone? Or are you going to do it on an ad hoc basis, depending on the nature and the makeup of each individual board henceforth? And I'm not saying, I don't know what the answer is. I'm not advocating one position or the other. But this is the problem when you are reacting to making policy on a specific case, as Brandy had initiated in the very beginning of the discussion. We got somebody from the city, a citizen that comes in, they want to do something. And it hasn't been thoroughly vetted by city council, planning and zoning board. Staff has been able to put some work into it to give us guidance. But that's where I'm at with it, is that I think if we're going to go down this road, we need to have some more conversation on what is really important.
And I just want to add too that I do have concern with some of the things that Todd was expressing, because the city, like, and I've already said this, if we would say that the conditions are that the covenants had to be followed, we would not want to get into that, because the covenants have to be followed. So if we want to condition that on top of the covenants already being in place, then why wouldn't we just adopt all the covenants? But we don't want that. Like, staff does not want to administer that. That's why covenants are great, because it upholds integrity of a district and a development at that.
I'm not saying that's what I want to do, but I'm just saying you can't tell what these 7 people are going to do on any given day when it becomes issue, when they are the authority. And I'm not trying to argue with you, but I'm not advocating that's
Theoretical
what you do, but I'm
scenario,
just telling you that it could possibly happen.
And yes, and if it did happen, we would make sure that everything was covered so that we were not getting ourselves into any legal issues. If the condition that the Board of Adjustment would put on a property or a conditional use, staff would make sure that that was being met.
I don't think I would be inclined to deny it because of a potential condition that this board could put on it. I mean, there's also potential that we wouldn't put any conditions on it.
Right.
I mean, as a conditional use, we have a lot of potential there, so.
Yeah. And generally, I agree that we don't want to get into the game of enforcing private covenants, especially in residential type developments and those types of things. But however, being that, I'll give you the context, 25 years ago when this district was created, and there were people from the city involved in developing the covenants that the Development Corporation and the Redlands put on this property. I mean, the city was engaged as part of that, as far from a staff, from elected officials, and there was a committee that was involved in putting that together. So I know that even though we didn't adopt the covenants for the very same reasons that Brandy's talking about, the players at the time were cognizant of the reasoning for it.
And just timeline-wise, when Todd touches on that, the covenants were established in 1998, and then the ordinance came into effect in 2002. So to me, it makes it seem like we wanted to stay high level on our design standards, and then we knew the covenants were here, so why would we get into the weeds?
I'm just telling you, I'm the only one in the room that was at both of those meetings, except for,
And I'm just recalling the timeline.
yeah.
So I think one of the challenges that I have with covenants and the way that we're kind of half in the covenants and half in the ordinance with some of these requirements is transparency. And if you've got somebody potentially coming into the town and they're looking at the districts and they're looking at the zoning ordinances and they want to build here, all we're showing them is the ordinance, right? That's all that we're publicly and transparently showing them.
But their realtor should be, like, when they purchase the property,
Yeah.
I'll tell you right now what I get here told on covenants is, which we won't go there tonight. Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
So what Todd is saying, if Mr. Redlin were here right now, 25 years ago, he didn't even think about storage units out there because that wasn't a concern. He was thinking a business park. So if you want to, go back and look at that, if somebody would said, oh, hey, Terry, what about storage units out there? I would guarantee you that they would have been in those covenants, is that there would be no storage units.
well, and they do have prohibited uses in there. And I think This is not storage units, this is indoor climate control
I
stuff.
understand. I'm just saying that even if he were here having this conversation before the whole development went up, I think it would have been not allowed. You see what I'm saying? If you're going to say his standards, under his covenants, they would have not been there.
Outdoor storage is not allowed.
I know, but we know how that's going to work. I mean, it's human nature. It's human nature.
Which is why I think we should vote it up or down, and down might be where it goes, but I don't think kicking it down the road help. Because I mean, when 3 years ago, we added a permitted use to this district with the religious institutions, and we didn't make a whole set of design criteria for it. We just added it.
We didn't have the ability through RLUIPA either to get into some of those crazy things.
But, I mean, I just feel like it's pretty close to apples there. I mean, we put it into the conditional use and then hope that our conditional use process vets out potential uses the way they're.
And I'm fine with that. I'm just saying I would, at this point in time, vote no. And I would say I'd leave the back door open to have a deeper conversation about under what circumstances would we be okay in the business park to have this type of use.
So can I add one more thing too with the mention of the RLUIPA?
I think I agree completely with what Todd just said there, but that we leave it open if something were to change, but I don't want to purposefully kick it down the road. If we vote on it here and then it goes up or down, and then that's where it's at, unless there's a reason to revisit it. You know, because I mean, if it does go down, then we don't need to keep looking into this one.
Right.
And we're going through recodification anyway, right? So we're already looking at some of these areas and we're looking at restructuring some of that stuff. So it may just be that we kind of reprioritize the order in which we look at these things.
I want to point out too, though, that is in 2019, we added the recreational use and the recreational facility to a permitted use. And then in 2013, we added the schools offering post-secondary education. And then there has been the off-sale beverage, basically bar, liquor store. Conditional use added in 2008. And then you get the radio and television studios. So things have been added, and we did not create design standards for each one of the uses because that is why they're under conditional uses.
Those are all permitted uses that you just read.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. So those, fine, but that would be more fitting to have design standards for a permitted use.
And we didn't do design
No.
standards for those, and we generally haven't created design standards for other conditional uses that we've added. Therefore, I don't feel that it makes sense to kick this down the road to try to create design standards. To me, it makes most sense to vote this up or down, and
Yep. Concur.
Do we have a motion?
a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. I think we've had the discussion. Anybody else have anything to add before we vote? Okay, roll call.
All right. Dargis Johnson.
No.
Hanson.
No.
Dolly.
No?
Spire.
No.
Oletsky.
No.
Brink.
Yes.
Kays.
That will not carry forward with recommendation from the board.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I would encourage staff to look at the business park regulations as they're looking at recodification to maybe come back with something that's somewhat consistent to the overlay district, because I do think that this could be a use that could fit in there, but I think rather than just making it up as we go, that we have some guidance. It doesn't have to be copycat of the covenants. We just need to make sure that we're looking at some things that are more in line with some of the other development that we have in that part of town.
And I guess consistent between the two districts, right? So if we do look at changing the Gateway Overlay District, that we'd
Yeah.
be consistent.
Yeah, I think a lot of mimic. And
When we redo the laws and the rules and stuff, you guys will be notified of those too, right? So it'll be open to the public?
yeah, so we'll do the public hearing, and just with the conversations that we've had with Julie, like I said, typically a district isn't notified, but with the BP district and the Redland Arts Center, the origin of it, I will keep her in the loop with it. And same with Watertown Development Company.
Yep.
So, because they're a part of the covenants too. So, yeah, I will definitely. And I will look at that. as far as what could maybe be added and to create some consistency between the two gateway districts. I mean, or maybe we just overlay the BP district with the gateway overlay. Like,
That
you know,
might-
take it
that
out.
That could be very easy. I mean, once you
Yeah.
once you get the overlay the way you like it from a staff perspective, it might very well easy just to draw a line on a map, and I think you would have 90% of the other landowners' concerns addressed.
Yeah, and then we make this more typical to other zoning districts and actually get rid of these because it's already gonna be in the overlay.
Yeah. And you can
I
still
like-
have, additional covenants inside of that district, but at
And they
least
still
it'd be
will.
consistent with the overlay.
And they still will.
Correct,
And so, yeah, no, I think that we can kind of consolidate some things here.
Sure. Okay. All right, moving on, open public comment. There wasn't anybody to sign up to speak on an agenda item that's not on the agenda. Any new business?
None that I have.
Any old business?
No,
Any reason for executive session?
nope.
I will adjourn us. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.